she was just a quiet grandmother tending her garden under the morning sun. Until alien warships ripped through the sky, snatched her from her peaceful world, and threw her into the cell of their deadliest dragon, believing she would be torn apart within minutes. But what they didn't know was that this fragile old woman carried the mind of a soldier and the heart of a storm. And she was about to rewrite the fate of everyone on that ship. If you are new to the channel, then please subscribe to the channel and like the video and tell us in the comments, where are you watching from? Now, let's jump into the story. ChatGPT said, "The morning on Hanpo began softly, with the first light slipping across the hills and settling on the small garden where Lee Hae-won worked. She was bending over her tomato plants, pulling out weeds with careful fingers. The soil was still cool from the night, and the air smelled of green leaves and damp earth. Her back ached a little, but she did not mind. She liked simple things that grew slowly. People in the colony knew her as the quiet grandmother, with kind eyes and steady hands. They often saw her here, tending the plants that gave color to the edge of the settlement. She moved slowly, but with purpose, and the world around her felt peaceful. Small birds hopped along the fence, and distant machines hummed near the square. It was the kind of morning that seemed too ordinary to ever break. Hae-won thought of baking later, and maybe walking to the market. But then, the birds went silent. It was so sudden that she paused with her hands still in the dirt. Even the insects stopped moving. The quiet was sharp, unnatural, and deep. She stood and brushed her palms on her faded apron. Her eyes lifted to the horizon. At first it looked like clouds, forming where none had been. But the shapes were too hard, too angular. Shadows rolled across the fields as the light dimmed. The sound grew louder until it pressed against her chest. 3 shits dropped from the sky, like pieces of night. They were not human ships. Their hulls were the color of dried blood, marked with claw-shaped symbols that glinted like sharp teeth. Glowing orange ports lined their sides, and the heat from their engines turned the air into a wavering haze. They blocked out the sun as they passed over the town. People came out of their homes, shading their eyes, staring up. Someone shouted for everyone to run. Panic rose fast, like fire catching dry grass. The ships landed in the colony square with a deep metallic crash. The ground trembled under Hae-won's feet. Dust and smoke lifted into the air and rolled toward the gardens. Then the silence cracked with screams. People ran in all directions, some clutching children, others carrying nothing but fear. The ships opened their sides like giant metal mouths. From the shadows inside, the Vordeck came. They walked upright, like humans. But they were taller, heavier, and covered in dark green scales that reflected light like polished stone. Their yellow eyes moved like blades through the smoke. Long jaws filled with sharp teeth opened in soundless snarls. They carried energy rifles that hummed with power. One of them raised his weapon and fired into the air. The beam hit the wall of a nearby shop, leaving a blackened hole. People screamed and dropped to the ground. The Vortek moved like a tide spreading through the streets. "Do not run," one of them said, his voice rough and broken, like stones grinding together. "Running makes hurt worse." HFY stood behind her fence, her hands hanging loose at her sides. She had seen fear before, though no one here knew that. To the people of Hanpo, she was just a gardener. She let them think so. She watched the Vortek drag people from their homes and herd them toward the ships. Children cried for parents who could not reach them. The quiet little colony had become chaos in minutes. A young woman ran past HFY's fence. Her name was Yara Sue. She carried her small son, Tino, who clung to her shoulder. Two Vortek soldiers chased them, their long legs covering the ground, fast. HFY's eyes followed them with a calm that felt strange, even to her. Yara stumbled at the corner of the fence, and the soldiers caught her. One twisted her arm until she dropped the boy. "Please," Yara cried. "Take me, not him." The soldier gave a sound like laughter. "Both go. Boy grows, boy fights." Tino sat on the ground with wide eyes. Dirt streaked his face. He did not cry, just stared at the towering figure above him. HFY stepped forward. Her body moved slowly, but her mind was sharp and clear. "Excuse me," she said in a soft, warm voice, the kind used for asking if someone wants tea. "Why are you taking our people?" The soldiers turned. They saw an old woman in a worn apron with silver hair pinned in a bowl. One gave a short laugh. "Old ones should hide. Weak bones no use." "I am not useful," HFY said, lowering her shoulders, making herself look smaller. "But I am curious." The nearer soldier stared at her for a moment. Then he reached out and gripped her arm. His claws pressed through the fabric, but not her skin. "Captain likes jokes," he said. "Old bones break quick. Good show." He pulled her forward, while the other soldier lifted Tino with one arm and pushed Yara ahead. The garden faded behind them as the street filled with running people and the burning glow of rifle blasts. The ships waited, with their open doors like black throats. HFY glanced back only once. Her tomato plants stood straight and green in the silence, untouched. Then the soldiers dragged her up the ramp and into the red metal belly of the Vortek ship, and the sky of Hanpo vanished behind her. A metal door slammed behind Lee HFY, sealing her inside with a deep hiss. The sound echoed through the chamber, like the closing of a tomb. She stayed very still for a moment, letting her eyes adjust to the dim light. The air was heavy and smelled of rust and something faintly sour, like old lightning. The walls rose high above her, curving inward as if the room had once been a storage bay. Now it was something else, something meant for fear. Cages lined the walls, each one built from black bars, thick as tree trunks. Some were empty, some still held broken bits of bone. The floor was scarred with claw marks that had dug deep into the metal. They crisscrossed like the frantic trails of trapped animals. But it was quiet now. Too quiet. The ship's engine hum came as a distant vibration beneath her feet. She slowly lifted her head. Two amber eyes glowed in the darkness. They were wide and still, set far apart, watching her. The shape around them stayed hidden for a long moment, then shifted. The sound was soft but deep, like rock sliding underwater. The creature moved forward one step. It was enormous. Its head nearly touched the ceiling. Black scales covered its body, each one ridged and shining faintly in the low light. Powerful legs bent under its weight, and a tail as long as a truck curled behind it. Thin lines of old scars cut across its neck and shoulders, pale against the dark scales. Its eyes burned with an intelligent light that did not match the prison around them. Haywan did not move. She let her breathing slow, steady. Fear was sharp, and sharp things could cut you if you let them. She had seen enough wildness to know what fear could trigger. "Hello," she said softly. Her voice sounded small in the hollow room. The creature's ears flicked. It tilted its head like it was listening. A low rumble rolled from its chest. Not angry, not welcoming either. She crouched down. Her eyes wandered over the walls, noticing the marks. At first, they seemed like scratches, but then she saw patterns. Loops and shapes repeated along the metal. Lines curved into maps or words she could not read. She pointed toward the marks. "You made these?" The creature's eyes followed her finger. It stepped closer. The ground trembled under its weight. It reached out with one huge claw and touched a cluster of circles carved into the wall. Then it let out a low, mournful sound that vibrated in her bones. "Home?" she asked gently. It turned its head toward her. After a moment, it pressed its clawed hand against its chest. A deep voice rolled from its throat, like stones falling down a canyon. "Korath! Korath," she repeated. Its eyes brightened, and something in its posture changed. The stiffness eased a little. She reached into the pocket of her apron. The guards had not searched her well. They had seen an old gardener and assumed there was nothing to find. Her fingers closed around a small cloth bundle. She opened it and pulled out a rice ball. "Food," she said. "For you." Korath froze. Its eyes went wide. The scent reached it, sharp and clean in the stale air. It moved closer, very slow, until its massive claws hovered over her hand. It could crush her without trying, yet it lowered its head instead and sniffed. "Take it," she said. The creature picked up the rice ball between two claws. It held it like something delicate. It took one small bite, then another. She watched it chew carefully, as if tasting something new for the first time. While it ate, she ate her own. The silence shifted. It was no longer heavy. When Korath finished, it set down the last grain with surprising care. Then it reached into a pile of twisted metal in the corner. It pulled out a small crystal, glowing with soft blue light. It held the crystal out to her. She accepted it carefully. It pulsed in her palm like a heartbeat. "Thank you," she whiffed. Korath settled down on the floor, folding its legs under its massive body. The amber eyes never left her. She realized then that it was waiting to see what she would do next. She studied the walls again. The scratches near the floor were shallower, newer. Some bent where the metal was thin. She stood and pressed her hand against a seam. It shifted slightly under her fingers. She glanced back at Korath. "They think we are weak," she said quietly. But they made a mistake. The creature tilted its head. They put us together. She tapped the thin seam and smiled faintly. Together is stronger. Korath let out a low sound that almost seemed like laughter. The blue crystal in her hand glimmered brighter. She sat down across from it, still holding the crystal. Her heart beat steady now, not fast. For the first time, since they had captured her, she felt something different. Not fear, not despair, hope. Above them, hidden cameras watched, expecting blood. But all they saw was an old woman and a creature nobody understood, sitting quietly on a scarred metal floor and planning something neither of their captors would ever expect. For 3 long days, Lee Hae-wan and the creature called Korath stayed in the cell together. To the guards watching through hidden cameras, they looked harmless. An old woman sitting quietly, and a beast lying still like a stone statue. But inside that stillness, plans were forming like silent storms. Hae-wan rose each day at the same slow pace, as if she had accepted her fate. She sat by the wall, mending the hem of her apron with a sharp sliver of metal she had broken from a loose panel. The guards saw only an old habit of keeping busy. They did not see how her eyes tracked the shadows under the doors, how she counted footsteps, how she timed the guard rotations by the hum of the ship's systems. She had done this before, in places far darker than this. Korath pretended to sleep, allowing. But its amber eyes opened whenever a noise passed outside. It watched her the way predators watch the wind, learning its patterns. It had once been proud. She could see that now. He had been chained and broken, but not fully. There was still strength inside him, waiting to wake. On the first night, when the ship's lights dimmed and the hum softened to a low thrum, she whispered to him. Her voice was so soft that only the creature could hear. She told him about battles she had seen long ago, when she had been more than a gardener. She spoke of cunning over strength, of how the smallest trick could turn giants into dust. Korath listened without moving. Only the faint twitch of his tail showed he understood. The next morning, she went to work on the metal bands around his neck. They were old restraints, cracked with age, but still dangerous. Every time he tried to move too quickly or use his strength, they sent bursts of pain through his body. She had seen technology like this before. It punished instinct until instinct died. But his had not. Hold still, she whispered. She used the metal sliver like a knife, sliding it between the band and his scales. Korath stayed completely still. Not even his breath stirred the dust. The band gave way with a snap and clattered to the floor. Korath shivered, and the amber light in his eyes flared brighter. Better? She asked. He lowered his head and let out a low rumble that felt like thanks. As if answering, the small blue crystal he had given her glowed. She began teaching him. She drew patterns on the floor with bits of wire, showing how small groups could defeat larger forces by using space, surprise, and speed. She spoke simply, using gestures and signs. Korath watched every move, then pushed the wire around with his claws to copy her. She pointed at the map of stars he had carved on the wall. Your people? He made a low sound and touched several stars, then dragged his claw across them in one sharp line. His family, his kind, were gone, taken by the same ones who now watched him like an animal. She placed her hand over his huge claw. "I lost people too," she said. Something passed between them then, silent and unspoken, but strong. By the third day, they had built a small armory from scraps. A bent panel became a blade. Wire became snares. Old bones became sharp tools. She hid them carefully in cracks in the walls. The guards never searched. They still saw only a weak human and a tired beast. She studied the guards' habits, memorized their language bit by bit, and listened for anything useful. They spoke of something called the Grand Games, where captured beings were forced to fight for the entertainment of wealthy guests. Important visitors would come to watch soon. "They will bring us out then," she told Korath. "They will expect blood." His eyes burned with a silent fire. "We will give them something else." He leaned close, his massive head lowering until his glowing eyes met hers. She told him the plan. It was dangerous. It was thin as paper. But if they worked together, it could free not only them, but everyone the Vordek had taken. He tapped the floor gently with one claw, a sign of agreement. She smiled faintly. Above them, the hidden cameras watched the old woman and the creature lying still on the floor. They saw only stillness. They did not see the sparks of rebellion passing between their quiet eyes. When the time came, they would not be P. They would be the storm. The fourth morning came wrapped in noise. The ship no longer carried the soft hum of steady travel. It pulsed with restless energy. Footsteps struck the metal floors in quick rhythms. Voices barked orders in the Vordek language. Far away, machinery groaned to life. Li Hei-wan sat in the corner of the cell, head bent, hands folded like she was praying. Korath lay across the floor with his eyes half shut, as still as stone, but both of them were awake. Every sense sharp. The door opened with a long hiss. Cold light poured into the cell. Captain Drax entered, his scales darker than the others, marked with old scars. He wore gold bands around his horns. His yellow eyes moved from Korath to Hei-wan with the calm of a hunter who believed the kill was already certain. "Still alive," he said, his voice scraping the air like broken stone. "Today the guests see you die." Two guards grabbed Hei-wan's arms. She let them pull her up, her body limp, her eyes wide with false fear. "Please," she whispered. "I only want to go home." Captain Drax gave a slow smile. "Your home burns, little bones. Today you give them a show." The guards dragged her out while others moved toward Korath. One jabbed a long electric prod into his side. Blue sparks cracked across his scales. Korath growled low, but he did not resist. Not yet. They led them through twisting corridors of red metal. The air grew hotter and drier as they neared the arena. The sound of engines deepened into a thundering hum. The smell of oil and scorched metal filled the air. They separated them at a junction. Two guards pulled Korath toward the holding gates, while the others took Hei-wan to a preparation chamber. Inside, bright lights glared on smooth walls. Clean clothes lay on a metal table. A young guard named Ron stayed behind to watch her. His scales were pale and unscarred. He turned away she said gently. An old woman deserves a little privacy. Ron laughed. You will be meat soon. Privacy is done. He looked down at the screen in his hands. That was his last mistake. HFY moved like a shadow cutting free. Her hands snapped around his head and twisted. His body crumpled silently. She caught his weapon before it hit the floor. Her hands moved with the memory of old battles. She pulled on the clean clothes, tucked the weapon into her belt, and dragged his body behind a storage bin. Then she slipped out into the corridor. She moved low and quick, like smoke through the ship. She had memorized the layout from Korath's drawings. She passed the crew quarters first. Half the guards were already at their posts for the games. The rest slept. She opened their doors one by one and ended their lives before they could rise. A knife was quieter than a rifle. By the time she left, 8 Vordek would never wake again. She moved on to the engineering deck. 3 workers crouched over control panels, adjusting power levels for the arena shields. She killed 2 before they saw her. The 3rd hit the alarm before she reached him. Red lights flashed. A voice shouted across the ship's speakers. Escape attempt! All crew to battle stations! HFY smiled. She ripped open the power junctions and crossed the wires. Energy surged through the systems. Lights blew out. The arena shields flickered and died. And then she heard it. The roar. It tore through the ship like a storm. Korath was free. The floor shook with his charge. Distant screams echoed through the halls. The sound of energy weapons cracked, followed by the crash of tearing metal. She ran toward the noise. The corridor opened onto the arena's upper decks. Bright lights flickered on and off. The floor below was wide and round, surrounded by rows of seats. Important guests sat in armored viewing boxes, watching in confusion as chaos shattered their entertainment. Korath ripped through the gates like paper. His scales blazed in the broken lights. Electricity sparked from his claws. The bands that had held him lay shattered behind him. He struck the guards like a living storm. HFY dropped from the balcony, landing hard on the sand of the arena floor. She ran to the control console at its edge. Sparks flew from broken circuits. She slammed her fist down on the release lever. Every cage door in the prisoner bays burst open. Humans and other captives spilled out, stunned but alive. "Run!" she shouted. Korath swung his tail, crushing a guard against the wall. Then he bent low. HFY grabbed the edge of his neck scales and climbed onto his back. "Now," she whispered. He charged. They tore through the far wall in an explosion of fire and smoke. The outer hull split open. Cold stars filled the gap beyond. Alarms screamed through the ship. Decompression howled like an angry wind. Korath leapt into the void. His wings, long hidden under chains, snapped open like dark sails. Energy poured from the glowing crystals embedded in his hide. He surged forward with a roar that split the night. Behind them, the Vordek ship burned. Prisoners escaped on small shuttles. The grand games were over. HFY pressed her cheek to Korath's warm scales as they vanished into the starfield. They had given the Vordek a show. But not the one they expected. The arena had become their doorway, and through it, they were free.